Good afternoon, viewers and listeners. Another fantastic opportunity to learn about a really interesting character and person in Johnny Hawkins. So welcome, Johnny, to the British Business Podcast, and thank you so much for giving up your time today so that our listeners and viewers can understand you a little bit and your journey and what it is that you've done in the business world.
Yeah, Michael, thanks very much for inviting me on. I'm delighted to be over here. My name's Johnny Hawkins. I'm in the motor trade. I grew up working with my brothers. I have three brothers, and I grew up beside the garage, as it used to be. My grandfather started the business about 100 years ago, and I'm the third generation. My brother James, who's a couple of years older than me, we sort of been running the business for the last 35 years. Typically in the motor trade, we are into cars. We've got partnered franchises such as Peugeot, Citroën, Hyundai, Kia, more recent Nissan and MG. When we sort of took over the business back in the late 80s, early 90s, the business was pretty well established, employed approximately about 50 people at the time between two branches. We're split throughout either end of Cornwall, mid Cornwall, and down in Hayle. And then since then we expanded the business to 7 dealerships throughout the county, and now we employ just under 300 people. Wow. Yeah, it's an interesting business, Michael. It really is.
It sounds very interesting. And there's so many avenues that I could go down. So what about you? How did you sort of get into business?
I think it was so typical of businesses back in the late 70s, early 80s, where they were very much living on site, and we grew up living on the site. My dad and my grandfather before that used to go out and serve the petrol, and we were in the house on the site. So our days were very much around the back of the garage, making, fixing, understanding the business from a very, very young age. So I think it was inevitable, unless we were prepared to go in a completely different direction. I feel that it was inevitable that that's what we were going to do. I think also from a young chap, maybe you felt a little bit, maybe it was a laziness that you didn't see yourself as going in any other directions with any other business.
Felt obligated?
I don't think he ever made us feel obligated as such. I think he was really grateful that we were actually interested, and I think that you get to a certain age in life where you actually think you're going to go and do other things, and then you realise that you've got a great family business. Why would you not want to be part of that? So I think that's the route that we took. Ironically, James, again, he's a couple of years older than me. We both had taken that direction. The other two brothers, they didn't want to get involved until one of them later on in the 15 years ago decided, you know what, the motor trade isn't such a bad place to be. I'll come back and work in the family business.
And as a family business, because a lot of people out there will be business owners, they'll be business controllers. There'll also be people who will be in a job right now who are looking to the future to try to go into business, launch their own business, start up a business. You had an established business that you went into. However, did you have to learn the trade? Did you have to show to your peers you knew what you were talking about?
Yeah, I mean, we did. We very much started on the bottom, to be honest. From a very young age, we were out helping them clean the cars and clean the premises. And then we both entered into the motor vehicle technician training area. We were very mechanically minded because we were brought up that way. We were brought up out, and at the time, my father, albeit that he was always at the premises, he never had time for us to show us how to fix that. We were always fixing it ourselves and learning to weld and learning all the things. So even now, the introduction into the business, you never forget. So we started very much on the ground, which is no question about it, has put us in good stead, because you can be the motor trade is a complicated business. You form these partnerships and these alliances with the manufacturers, and the manufacturers are very, very demanding. And I think unless you were actually in the motor trade, you wouldn't realise the constraints, the dictation that you have from our partnered manufacturers. They really do put a lot of pressure on us, and that is why I think probably one of the ways to explain it is if you were looking at McDonald's, all McDonald's are the same. They've got to create the same meal. They've got to come at the same premises, and it's very much like that with manufacturers. Our manufacturers, everyone has got to be very similar. So the corporate identity of the business, the square footage of the showroom's got to be a certain size. The demonstrators have all got to be the right demonstrators, and all these things. So I think that it does, when you start off at the bottom in the business, you really know what you're talking about when you go through the later years in our industry.
And right now, how many team members do you have working with you?
We have about 290 team members in our business. Our alliances with our manufacturers at the moment, we are Peugeot, Citroën, Kia and Hyundai and Nissan, and more recently MG. So we got a cross section of the brands that are out there,
and that's all across Cornwall.
Yeah, we're very much Cornwall based. We have had opportunities to move to other counties and represent our business, but I think to do the job properly, you need to be on it, and it is a real fickle business to be in, and we need to be on it all the time. And I don't think we would have the experience to be able to run a dealership from not being a little bit hands-on. So out the county, we've never sort of ventured, but very much in Cornwall. Like I say, we've been here a very, very long time. We've got some really good customers, and we've got some really good staff. I've got staff members that have been with me for over 50 years, that are now coming obviously up to retirement and retired. Sure. But currently I've got many that's been spent a lot over 30 years that have been with us, and customers alike. One
of the key things that comes through, especially over this last 6 months that we've been talking to business owners, is about team engagement, team recruitment, mainly team retention. Do you measure your retention rates at your business?
We have got a very loyal following of staff. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it's really tricky to get any good staff, and it's quite bizarre, really, that we are talking about a time of hardship that we actually can't get staff. It doesn't quite tally up, and I guess there's a lot of things that had a lot of an effect on that. I think Brexit had a big effect. I think it's had more of an effect of what we thought, and I think that's getting quite political then. And my personal views are, I think we've lost a lot of good people out of the chain of any business. For instance, the valeting game, every car needs to be valeted, and a few years ago there was a lot of Europeans that were quite happy to do those jobs. They're no longer here, so I think, and then it has a knock-on effect right down through, and that's not just in our industry, that's in every industry. So that has had a massive effect. It is bizarre, but we have got a lot of loyal staff. We spend, as a company and as a family business, we feel that we're very much in tune with our staff members, and I think that by that we do get a bit more loyalty than maybe some other companies.
Which is massively important, isn't it? Because when we've talked to, especially in the hospitality trade, they are absolutely hemorrhaging the team members. You talk about Brexit and you talk about EU workers that came across, and that is something that I think that only now, nobody really thought about it at the time of the Brexit vote. I think if we'd have known now, if we'd have known then what we know now, I think people would have
I think at first Brexit, bearing in mind we were importing French cars, and we all like a good holiday abroad, and we all like these nice things that being part of Europe brought us, and the stability, especially with the sad war of late. I think the stability of being part of Europe, personally, I enjoyed. However, and at the first, it was a very sore subject for me. But I think everybody was uninformed of what the real consequences were about coming out of the EU. So I think everybody had an opinion. Everybody's got a right. Sure. It wasn't one that I really was happy about. But nevertheless, we were ill-informed. You're right. If we knew what we knew now, would we have done it? I think things have been different.
So we had Brexit, and obviously that's, I think, only really over the last year we started to see the results of that. The pandemic happened. How did that affect your business?
I think at the time, I don't think anybody really knew what to be doing. I think, we thought that the industry was going to come to a grinding halt. Who would have thought that 2 years after the pandemic that we couldn't get supply? Who would have thought that people weren't prepared to work? We had a global...
What do you mean, sorry to interrupt, what do you mean by supply? We couldn't get supply.
Right.
So what's happened there?
I think the first thing after the pandemic has kicked off, when we all get back to some kind of reasonable normality, is the supply of certain components for our vehicles were very much restricted. One of the real big problems was a supply of chips. That we've got thousands of these little microchips that run in our cars. For instance, you have one in your keys, for instance, and these microchips were in various countries not being produced. There was a complete drought, and they call them semiconductors, and there is a real problem with them, and hence why now in some of the premium brand cars that you're still being supplied is you're only being supplied with one key, because if they supply two keys, it means they can't possibly build another car to supply another customer. So semiconductors were a real shortage coming out of the pandemic, so much so that the Koreans have now built their own factories and things to not be so much reliant on other countries such as China and possibly Ukraine and Russia for some of these components. So we had the pandemic, which caused a real problem with supply since then, and we're still way off where we were on supply constraints now. If prior to the pandemic happening, you could come in and order it. We could probably get most vehicles for you, even if it's a special order, probably within a time frame of 4 months. Some of those vehicles now have gone back to like 14 months to get the same vehicles. So it is a constant problem at the moment. So hence new vehicle registrations are rapidly down, and therefore it affects our business tremendously.
I was just about to ask you, how does that affect not only turnover but cash flow?
It's a big problem. It just knocks on from that, Michael, in that what happens is the supply 2 years ago, the manufacturing was down like 40%, and registrations are down 40% of new vehicles.
40%?
Yeah, at that particular time. Our business also survives on the reselling of used vehicles.
Okay.
So things where like big fleet companies and rental companies would be selling their vehicles, they might end up going through our hands because the supply of new vehicles weren't being registered. They were not having newer vehicles at the time, and we are feeling the effects of that now in the lack of used vehicles that are on the market that we can resell. So it's a real big problem, and I don't know if you've noticed, if you've had your holiday, wherever it might be, or you've wanted to get a hire car. Hire cars have gone through the roof in the cost of renting them.
Yep.
And the hire cars aren't so new as they used to be, quite possibly. And that is because the manufacturers have stopped supplying rental vehicles and big fleet vehicles where they enjoyed really big discounts prior to the pandemic. So what's happening is a lot of these fleet companies are getting not the terms from the manufacturer that they used to get.
Wow. I absolutely have. I've been away to Europe, and I had that. I couldn't believe the price.
Yeah.
It was something like 3 times the price.
Yeah, and that's what's been happening. And that is happening not only on the hire side, but also on the actual cost of the vehicles.
Wow.
So everything's gone up.
So that pandemic happened, that shortage of those in the supply chain was then had a knock-on effect. So how is the market right now?
The market, the demand has dropped slightly, and I think that's just that's where we are at the moment in the economic situation we are in, and the supply is slightly better. So we are in a probably slightly better place to supply, but I think we've had a pretty good time of it, to be honest. And I think lots of businesses, I think we've had a good time of it. Okay. And I think that we're realistically that wave was not going to carry on forever. Our business has changed. Our business has very much changed. The electrification is well on us now of motor vehicles. We are no petrol vehicles sold after 2030, less than 8 years away. Have we got the infrastructure to cope with it? Have we got the vehicles out there to sort of supply? And what cost are those vehicles? So we are going through quite a turmoil with our business, but fortunately, with our good staff, our good customers, we're actually in quite a good place and we're ready for it. We're very innovative in what we do as well.
So 100-year business, you're on the board, you are with your family.
Yeah.
In terms of strategic planning, which is a great term that I talk to a lot of business owners about, you're already looking at 2030 because of that electrification. Is that something that right now you're taking measures for, or is it impossible to do that?
I think to look to 2030 is probably quite impossible, because not only is the industry changing because of electrification, it's also changing with technology, the internet sales. Fortunately, we sell motor cars. We have the facility, we have everything in place where we can sell vehicles online. And although you will see that there's two big players at the moment. There's two big players that sell vehicles direct online, and they're struggling, to be honest. They are struggling to make a business case out of it on selling vehicles online, used vehicles online. It doesn't come without its problems. So although we've got that facility to be able to do that, and one or two we do, our core business at the moment is still very much, people still want to talk to people about buying their car, why it's right for you, what happens if there's a problem, where can I go with it, and all the backup that we've always done and conventionally done and always will do moving forward. Looking at 2030, how technology will look in the way we're selling cars will be different than it is now for sure. How much different, we don't know. What we do know, because we are not in control of the run out of electric and the run out of diesel and ICE engine cars to the electrification of every car, that is something beyond our control. So we're having to run with that, and the manufacturer are having to run with it, and they are really on it to try to get ahead of the game with this. But so far as our staff and our future planning for our business, we did a massive campaign. We realised that, we have to keep young blood in the business.
Sure.
So fortunately, I've got 3 sons. My brother's got 1 son. My brother's boy has just come back into the business at the age of 26. I have 2 boys that are in the business. My youngest one, who's 18, and my other one is at 24. He's into the business. The youngest one is very, very, very keen in the business. So I'm putting a bit of hope without too much pressure on him wanting to come into it.
Sure.
But on top of that, this year we've recruited 7 young apprentices that we did a really big, great campaign, a bit like the Alan Sugar campaign, to be honest with you. And it was in conjunction with the radio station, and we did a fantastic job in the recruiting of 7 apprentices that are specifically for the future to continue the legacy of our business. So and that's working out really well.
So was that a plan that you made, and you sat down with the board or strategic people in your business and thought, you know what, it would be really good to target and look at the apprenticeship sort of process? Is that what you did?
Yeah,
we set that out.
We knew we need young people in the business. We need to be on the ball. Like I said, I touched on earlier, our business is a very complicated business when you're tied up with the manufacturer. Customer satisfaction, every guy that comes in the door or every customer that comes in the door is targeted. A 9 is a fail.
Really?
A 9 to the manufacturer is a fail, and that is it. You mark me 9 when you're coming to buy your coffee, Michael, and you'll think you're doing me a favour. It's a fail. So, and we get penalised heavily on that, heavily. So we have to be at the top of our game in every respect. So to do that, we have to be on the ball. To be on the ball, when you've been in the business a long time, it's hard to stay up there all the time and be focused 100% of the time. So we know that we need to bring young people in our business. So this year we always take on a number of apprentices, which mainly start off as a vehicle technician. They mainly end up in the servicing departments and workshops and things like that. This year we said, no, what we actually needed to do is to target younger people that one day could do the job of what the directors are actually doing now. So that's what we did, and we have recruited 7 really good people.
So that succession planning is critical.
Yeah, definitely. It is. And so we're on that. And we'll just, hopefully they will all enjoy the industry, and hopefully they'll stay with us, and hopefully it will all work out.
Because the apprenticeship scheme is actually a government-backed, government-run scheme. However, it's critical that they speak to the business owners where those apprenticeships are going to go in order to run that, because without you, there is no apprenticeship scheme.
Yeah, and there is, and I think that it's quite frustrating that that we do spend a lot of time. We've got a great relationship with the Cornwall colleges, especially one of them, and we've been talking to them on and they're very much there's a new guy in charge of the Cornwall College, and he's really on the ball with asking the companies what they want from the colleges.
Sure.
You know, and one of the frustrations for me over the years was you take on an apprentice, and you know, one of the key roles in our business is selling. It's not selling like we used to know it. No, it's sure. Actually accommodating the customer and looking after him. Do you know what? There's not a scheme that exists other than by the manufacturers, which aren't anything like they used to be, that actually there is not a scheme or a course that exists on how to become a salesman or a sales assistant or whatever you want to call it. So, and this is where I think that governments and colleges need to actually go out and ask a little bit what that would have been
unheard of 30 years ago.
Yeah, it would have been, and we, you know, and there are children, even though everything's done by social media and texting and communicating through the phone, but there are actually kids out there that actually do want to speak to people still.
Sure.
You know, they're not learning that. They're not learning the basics of communication. And so when you say to me, taking on an apprentice and a salesman, really difficult to find a course that they can accommodate them.
And you'd think, I certainly think that actually without that core skill, business is going to die.
It's life skills.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, amazing that we've got onto this, and I think that some of the insights that you're giving us here today are fundamental for the future. In terms of the overall business and sales, as a business owner, are you constantly thinking about ways to better the business, to increase sales, to get new staff team members in? Because I do know we've had some feedback from lots of viewers and listeners to the podcast about what do they think about, because they can't always be thinking about business. And I say, I'm always thinking about the business.
I think my makeup, and I think anybody's makeup that runs a business and even one that a business that was already established, I feel that we've probably just about earned our stripes after 35 years of keeping it going. And you know what they say, you know, the first generation gets to go and the second one just coats it, and usually it's the third one that messes it up.
Okay.
There was a lot of pressure not to mess it up. But I think if you're that makeup of person, you're always looking for an angle of a business, of whatever it is. And it could be you're on holiday sat there thinking, I think that would be a good opportunity. I think this would be a good opportunity. So I think it's in your DNA to a certain extent that you are. So yeah, we're consistently looking, and believe me, we have to innovate, we have to change the way we're doing things to accommodate not only with what the customer demands are, but technology, what the demands are also from, you know, the global supply, and what the demands are from what governments around the world want to do, sustainability and things like that. We are in a trade that it is very, very complicated.
Did you feel pressure?
Yeah.
Did you?
Do you feel pressure? I think the pressure you feel now is you're very responsible for all of the staff members that you employ every day and are responsible for.
And has that changed in the last 10 years, the last 5 years, or has it always been there?
I think it's always been there. I think you get a little bit more mellow in yourself as you get older. And I don't think you get personally. There was a time when you knew you would go around turning off lights and thinking, we can't afford to do that. Now it's a little bit, you're a little bit more chilled about it. But the thought of letting all your staff, especially the ones that have been really loyal to you, letting them down in any way, I think there's a lot of reason why I'm at work is because of that.
So you're putting the pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
To make sure that you're there for the team.
Very much.
Because you've got livelihoods in your
Depend
hands.
Depend on it.
Wow. We've got we've got a business called Staff Hut, and the strapline is supporting families to create better communities. And what we're trying to say to businesses all the time is, you're at the absolute cornerstone and centre of communities. The team members that work for you, we're trying to say to those businesses, if you invest in those people, they're going to go back to the families, and it's the families that sort of thrive with the money that then create those amazing communities. We all want to live in an amazing community, don't we? Yeah. And having an amazing community, everybody thrives. Yeah. So the businesses will thrive. It's like a self-perpetuating.
It is, and there's a number of things that we've done this year. For instance, there's a big thing on mental health, isn't it? Out of lockdown, a lot of people are in not in a great way, and we see it across a number of people across our business that aren't in great shape, and our door's always open for them. And we've brought a specialist in for mental well-being and health and stuff like that we have consistent. We've put mental health champions in various departments, so the poor person that doesn't know where to turn, whether it's a home problem or a work problem, can call on these people. They've now been trained to help.
So that's an investment that the business has
very
made.
Much so, and we pay an ongoing fee to get all this. We have a specialist working on it, coming on, and so much so that we're a massive believer that exercise is a real big thing to help with mental health, and I know that from my own experience in trying to look after myself with exercise, and so much so we went out and bought a whole load of push bikes and things for the staff to use, and we've had people where they've taken them out, given them a half a day a week to go out and go cycling and stuff like that, because I think that's really important. I think the time we get back, the productive hours we get back from them in a better place is amazing. So that's sort of worked really well. And the other thing that I have been talking to, I did write to our local MP, you touched on his name earlier, and he put me in touch, because the other thing is, we talked about having good staff in Cornwall. Cornwall's a great place to live, and a lot of people are wanting to live here, and essentially the houses and living has gone through the roof. And I feel that for us to continue to enjoy great loyalty from our staff, we have to find a better and more cost-effective way of them to live. And I'm literally actively looking to see how we can afford to find accommodation for our staff members up to a certain age, that they can come and work for us, and they would get a property that they can rent at a sensible rate to enable them to work for us.
Because you're a unique county, aren't you? You have very, very few properties, because they're such
second homes,
absolutely,
or rental, holiday lets. Although I think that's changing a bit.
Okay.
I think a lot of people tried that on last year, and I think this year is not quite as and I think a little bit short-sighted and a bit selfish on some of that, to be honest with you. Sure. So I think there will be a few more properties come back to local people that deserve them, and even places where we're like sitting in now. I'm sure that some of the people that work here cannot afford to live in the locality of where we're sat now.
That's a real conundrum, isn't it?
So I feel, if we go back long before my time and your time, is people used to live above the shop, didn't they?
Absolutely, yes.
And I think it's crucial that when strategic planning and things like this is carried out in this county, we actually need to be thinking about not only building houses in the middle of nowhere, or they need to be built in close to work proximity, so these people that actually come and work for us, our 280 employees, don't have to drive 30 miles to go to work. They can actually go to work next door.
Because ultimately the person that falls foul of that is the customer.
Yeah.
Because if it's here, and they're late for work, and they've not got somebody to turn the bed or whatever, then
exactly. People, staff will not want to drive all that way to go to work. So I think that strategically we need to really think about how we're building houses and where we're building houses, and we should be building them next to industry, and we should be building them where people can commute. Like I say, living above the shop, maybe not quite, but maybe a bit closer than we are at the moment.
Sure. Is there anything that we've missed? Is there anything that you want to push? Is there anything you want to speak about?
I think that I'm grateful for you obviously hosting me today and looking after me. The motor industry is it's going to be an interesting watch over the next few years. I think, like I touched on, electrification, supply, premises, staffing, all these things is going to be an interesting watch.
They're
It
all
certainly
critical,
is
aren't
very, very critical. And the manufacturers are looking at a different way of trying to supply as well. They're, in some cases, the manufacturers themselves have decided that they might want to supply direct and things like that. So I think, Michael, interesting times in the motor trade for sure. We're not always in control of our own destiny when it comes to being partnered with a manufacturer, but it's going to be just as exciting as it ever was.
Wow. As always, Johnny Hawkins talking to you this afternoon. Thank you so much for coming in. It's been fascinating to listen and learn about your industry and about you personally. And from the British Business Podcast, until next time,